The air in the law office was thick with perfume, money, and arrogance. Dana sat quietly in the corner of the mahogany-paneled room, clutching the hem of her skirt, trying to steady her trembling hands. Her parents, Martin and Evelyn Harper, sat at the head of the polished table, smiling smugly as if they already knew how the afternoon would end. Her older brother, Greg, leaned back in his chair, twirling his pen and whispering jokes to their sister, Rachel, who covered her mouth to hide her laughter. "Thank you all for coming," said Mr. Lowell, the family lawyer. His voice carried the weight of routine. Calm, practiced, detached. "As you know, we're gathered to execute the final will and testament of Mr. Frederick Harper." At the mention of her grandfather's name, Dana's heart gave a painful tug. He was the only one who had ever truly seen her, who praised her art, her kindness, and her quiet strength. When he passed, she'd been the only one who cried. Her family had only discussed his estate and assets. Mr. Lowell cleared his throat and began reading. "To my son Martin Harper, I leave the Harper estate in Connecticut, valued at $5 million. Martin grinned, nodding proudly as if he'd earned it. "To my daughter-in-law, Evelyn Harper, I leave $2 million in cash and my collection of vintage jewelry." Evelyn gasped dramatically, pressing a manicured hand to her chest. "Oh, Frederick was always so generous," she murmured, glancing around to ensure everyone heard. "To my grandchildren, Greg and Rachel Harper, I leave $1 million each and access to my trust fund upon their next birthdays." Greg smirked, winking at Rachel. "Guess it pays to be the favorites," he whispered, loud enough for Dana to hear. "And finally," Mr. Lowell continued, adjusting his glasses, "to my granddaughter, Dana Harper." The room went quiet. Dana felt her heart race. Maybe her grandfather had left her something meaningful. Not wealth, but perhaps one of his old paintings or letters. Something sentimental. "I leave the sum of $10. For a moment, there was silence. Then laughter erupted around the room like cruel thunder. Greg nearly fell off his chair, clutching his stomach. $10? What's she gonna do with that? Buy a sympathy card?" Rachel giggled, covering her smirk with her hand. "Maybe a bus ticket, one way out of our lives." Her parents didn't bother hiding their amusement. "Well," Evelyn said, pretending to dab her eyes, "it seems Frederick finally realized charity has limits." Dana sat frozen. Her ears rang, her throat burned. $10. That was her worth to them? To the man who once told her she had the purest heart in the family? Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them see her break. She stood slowly, ready to leave, when Mr. Lowell suddenly raised a hand. "Actually," he said, voice steady, "there's one more item." The laughter faded. All eyes turned to him. Mr. Lowell reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small envelope, cream-colored and sealed with a wax insignia. Her grandfather's crest. Her name, Dana, was written in his familiar handwriting. "This," he said, sliding it across the table, "is a private letter. Mr. Harper requested it be delivered only to you." Silence. You could hear the air shift, disbelief replacing arrogance. Evelyn frowned. "A letter? What kind of letter?" "I'm afraid that's confidential," Mr. Lowell replied. Dana stared at the envelope, her pulse pounding. The laughter was gone now, replaced by uneasy curiosity. Her brother leaned forward, trying to peek, but she slipped the letter into her bag before he could. She didn't say a word as she rose from the table. She didn't glare, didn't cry, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. She simply turned and walked toward the door. But before leaving, she paused and looked back, her voice low and steady. "It's funny," she said, "how $10 can be worth more than everything you've ever had." Then she left, leaving behind a room full of silence and uneasy faces. Because somewhere deep down they all knew, Frederick Harper never did anything without a reason. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. As though it carried not just paper, but something alive inside it. Dana sat on the small bench in the park her grandfather used to take her to. The same one overlooking the city skyline where they used to share stories and roasted chestnuts every winter. The sky was pale gray, the wind cool against her skin. She turned the envelope over and over in her hands, afraid and curious all at once. Finally, she broke the seal. Inside was a neatly folded letter, written in her grandfather's elegant, deliberate handwriting. The first line made her breath catch. My dearest Dana, if you are reading this, it means I have left this world, and you have just been humiliated. She blinked, stunned. How could he know? I can already picture their laughter. Don't let it wound you, my child. Let it sharpen you. The $10 they mocked is not your inheritance. It's your key. The rest is hidden, and only you can find it, because only you can understand what truly matters. Dana's eyes filled with tears. Every word felt like his voice beside her again. Calm, loving, wise. For years, I've watched this family rot from the inside. Greed turned them hollow. Vanity made them cruel. But you were different. You cared for me when I was sick. You listened when others only wanted what I had. That's why I chose you, Dana. I hid the truth in plain sight. Start with the painting, The Lighthouse Keeper. You'll know what to do. At the bottom of the page, there was a hand-drawn sketch of the painting he had once hung in his study. A lonely lighthouse on a cliff, light piercing through stormy seas. Dana clutched the letter to her chest. For the first time in years, she smiled. The next morning, she visited her grandfather's old mansion, now claimed by her father. Evelyn opened the door with a look of annoyance. Oh, it's you. Come to beg for more. Dana ignored her and walked past. I just want to see grandfather's study, she said simply. Her father appeared in the hallway, arms crossed. Fine. Make it quick. We're having guests soon. The study was exactly as she remembered. The scent of old books, the ticking of the grandfather clock, the painting of the lighthouse keeper hanging above the fireplace. She stared at it, her heart racing. The lighthouse's beam seemed to point toward the base of the cliff, toward the darkness. Instinct guided her. She removed the frame carefully and noticed faint scratches at the back. Her fingers traced along the edge, until she felt a small latch. It clicked. A hidden compartment slid open, revealing a small brass key and a folded note. Bank of New Haven, Safety Deposit Box 714. Her pulse quickened. She tucked both into her bag before anyone could see and left silently, pretending to admire the garden on her way out. That afternoon, she took a train to New Haven and presented the key. The clerk checked the number and brought her a small metal box. Inside were several documents, property deeds, company shares, and a thick envelope labeled confidential, Harper Industries. Her hands trembled as she flipped through them. Everything was in her name. Her grandfather had transferred the controlling shares of his entire business empire. Not to her father, not to her siblings, but to her. There was also another note, smaller this time. You are now the true heir, but not of their kind. Build something honest, something that will make this family remember what goodness looks like. And when the time comes, they will know why I chose you. Tears rolled down Dana's cheeks as she whispered, I won't let you down, Grandpa. She looked at the $10 bill tucked in her wallet, the one she'd refused to throw away. For months, Dana vanished from her family's world. No calls, no texts, no appearances at their smug dinner parties or charity galas. Her parents assumed she had sunk into shame, hiding from the embarrassment of being the $10 heir. What they didn't know was that Dana was building something far greater than they could ever imagine. The papers her grandfather had left her were more than ownership documents. They were blueprints for renewal. Harper Industries, once a thriving construction and renewable energy firm, had been slowly stripped and neglected under Martin Harper's greed. The company's name had become a stain in the business world, whispered with disdain among investors. Her grandfather had predicted it. That's why he had hidden the true ownership until now, saving it for someone who still had integrity. Dana spent her nights studying every page, every clause, every signature. She took online business courses, consulted old employees who still remembered her grandfather fondly, and learned how to lead. Not with ego, but with purpose. She renamed the company quietly, Lighthouse Renewables. The lighthouse never abandons the lost, she murmured to herself, remembering her grandfather's words. Using the untouched reserves in her grandfather's accounts, she reopened one of the old plants that had been shut down years ago. She hired back former workers her father had fired, men and women who had once called her grandfather a hero. Together, they built solar panels and wind turbines, focusing on clean energy and community support. Dana didn't crave the spotlight. She wanted the legacy her grandfather dreamed of, honest success. Months turned into a year. Lighthouse renewables began to rise, slowly at first, then rapidly. Investors took notice of the mysterious new CEO who revived an old empire with quiet strength. Articles appeared online. Lighthouse Renewables, the company that rose from the ashes. Others speculated about the anonymous woman behind the business, D. Harper, as the documents listed. Her father, meanwhile, was sinking. Harper Estate was in trouble. Years of overspending, bad investments, and unpaid loans had begun to surface. Martin refused to believe it at first, until the bank sent foreclosure notices. Evelyn's jewelry collection had already been pawned quietly. Greg's reckless spending and Rachel's socialite habits only added fuel to their downfall. At dinner one night, Evelyn snapped, "If your father's company hadn't gone bankrupt, we wouldn't be living like this." "Don't you dare blame me," Martin shot back. "It's that damn old man's fault. He ruined us by leaving it all to rot." Greg slammed his glass down. "And Dana? She's probably waitressing somewhere, wishing she had more than her $10. Rachel laughed bitterly. Good. She was always the pity case. But deep inside, they all felt it, the slow, creeping discomfort of karma. Meanwhile, in a quiet office overlooking the same city skyline where she once cried, Dana sat behind her sleek desk, her nameplate reading Dana Harper, founder and CEO. She didn't smile often, but when she did, it was real, soft, humble, peaceful. Her assistant knocked gently. "Miss Harper, there's a media request for an interview. They want to know the story behind the company's success." Dana looked up from her papers, eyes thoughtful. "Not yet. Let them wonder a little longer." She walked to the window, watching the evening lights flicker across the city. Somewhere out there, her family was struggling, the same people who had laughed at her pain. But she didn't feel joy in their downfall. Not yet. Her revenge wasn't to see them fall. It was to rise, so high they'd have no choice but to look up. She pulled out her grandfather's letter one more time, its edges soft from being read too often. "You were right, Grandpa," she whispered. "The light always finds its way through the storm." The reflection staring back at her wasn't the timid girl from the will reading anymore. It was the woman her grandfather had believed she could become, strong, patient, and unstoppable. 2 years later, the Harper family was unrecognizable. The grand estate in Connecticut had been sold to pay off debts. Greg had lost his trust fund gambling, Rachel's high society friends had drifted away, and Martin and Evelyn now lived in a modest suburban home, far removed from the life of luxury they once flaunted. Their names, once synonymous with power, had faded into whispers of failure. But one morning, a glossy envelope arrived at their door. Inside was a gold-embossed invitation. Lighthouse Foundation requests your presence at its annual charity gala, hosted by D. Harper, CEO. Evelyn's eyes widened. "Harper," she murmured, her manicured hand trembling slightly. "Could it be?" Martin snorted, though his tone was uneasy. Probably some distant cousin riding on the family name. Still, it might be a good chance to network. We could use new connections. They decided to attend. Pride was a stubborn parasite, even in ruin. The night of the gala shimmered with elegance. The grand ballroom glowed under chandeliers, filled with the city's most influential figures. Reporters lined the red carpet. Cameras flashed. Guests whispered admiration for the event's mysterious host, the elusive D. Harper, who had revitalized a dying company into a global symbol of innovation and integrity. When the Harpers entered, their eyes darted across the lavish room. Greg muttered, "Whoever this D. Harper is, they sure know how to throw money around." Then the music faded, and the announcer's voice rang through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and CEO of Lighthouse Renewables, Ms. Dana Harper." Silence fell. Evelyn's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Greg's jaw hung open. Martin turned pale. And there she was, radiant, poised, and calm, dressed in an elegant midnight blue gown. Dana walked across the stage as flashes from cameras lit up the room. Her hair, once plain and unkempt, now framed her face like a crown of quiet defiance. She smiled softly, not with arrogance but with peace. "Good evening," she began, her voice strong yet warm. "Tonight, we gather not just to celebrate success, but to honor the man who taught me what true legacy means. My grandfather, Frederick Harper. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The name commanded instant respect. My grandfather believed that wealth without goodness is just greed wrapped in gold. When he passed, he left behind not just assets, but lessons, ones I carry with me every day. Lighthouse Renewables was built on his vision, to guide others through darkness, as a lighthouse does for the lost. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. For a heartbeat, her eyes met her parents'. The moment was heavy, but she didn't look away. There's one last thing I'd like to share, Dana continued. My grandfather left me a second letter, one I was told to read when the time was right. I believe that time is now. The room hushed. Cameras focused. Dana unfolded the aged paper and began reading aloud. To the Harper family. If you're hearing this, it means you've seen what greed does when love is forgotten. You mocked what you didn't understand and valued what you couldn't keep. Dana was the only one who remembered that kindness is a currency no fortune can buy. She is my true heir, not of money, but of heart. Learn from her if you can still learn at all. When she finished, the room was silent. No applause, no murmurs. Just the weight of truth. Dana looked up, eyes calm. This foundation, and every dollar we raise tonight, will go to restoring schools, supporting families, and funding scholarships in his name. Because his legacy wasn't gold. It was goodness. Applause thundered, rising like waves. Her parents sat motionless, faces pale under the spotlight. Evelyn's eyes glistened, not from pride but shame. Martin lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. Dana stepped down from the stage, her smile serene. She passed her family without a word, but in that silence was everything: forgiveness, strength, and a quiet kind of revenge far sharper than cruelty. As she exited the ballroom, the echo of applause followed her like a hymn. She touched the locket around her neck, a tiny photo of her grandfather inside, and whispered, "We did it, Grandpa." The light found its way.